Okay, it does say we are live. One moment. Once I'm able to see us. There we go. We are live, audience. Confirm you are able to hear us on a wonderful, incredible Monday. Everybody, happy afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you're tuning in. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're doing well. We are going to dive into Josephus, Council of Trent. We had a great question that came up earlier, and all kinds of things. And no, not Madrid audio, Abel, because Madrid audio would mean that it was stolen. And I purchased this. I really did pay for this. All right, everybody, if you all know about football, soccer, you'll get that joke. You'll get that joke. If you don't worry about it. There's no worry. Nothing important about Real Madrid to talk about that. Brothers, how y'all doing, man? How you been, brother? How you doing, Gary? How you doing, David? How's everybody doing?
Doing great. Can't complain.
Yeah, fantastic. It's like the third day I'm here on the Apocrypha Apocalypse in a row.
Right.
That's really? Third in a row.
Yeah, so that's just a sweet treat for me.
I love it, man. I wanted to join you guys the other day. I was just so busy, and it was actually my daughter's first communion, so I was not able to join. It was a wild day.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Awesome.
It was I really thought I was going to have a little bit of time, but it was crazy. It was crazy till late in the afternoon. But glad to be back from the team now. And Gary, how about you tell everybody, what are we going to be diving into? What are we going to be talking about right now?
Yeah, actually, David just gave a perfect segue. We were doing the members hangout Sunday, and I forgot how, but somehow Josephus came up. I don't remember, but anyway, we had a great time chatting with Random Catholic and Hollywood Big Boss, and just a really good discussion. And Daniel Hay comes on with some questions, and David came up, and we started talking about Josephus. And I thought, we have all these wonderful little tidbits. I think that the discussion was on that epistle from the Assyrian king.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, we should do a live stream where we get all these weird things about Josephus, because it doesn't simply call the Protestant use of Josephus in the question. I think it tears it into tatters. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. So I quickly threw some slides together and sent it over to Dr. David and
Dr. David.
That's right. Triple D. And he added some awesome slides, some things I forgot about. And so we thought, we'll do this. We'll get all our shots on Josephus and the Canon all together. And I think when you see it all together, I think it will be pretty amazing.
I love that. We're going to have a great time here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually thinking of titling this something like Josephus Destroys the Protestant Canon.
And we can always retitle it. Yeah, we can always retitle it. Sorry, guys.
That would be great.
No. Yeah, but I was actually thinking of a little clickbaity kind of.
Yeah, that's a good clickbait. I think.
Yeah.
If you can, William, just change the title, because that's very provocative.
It is, and hopefully we get people. By the way, along the way, people don't agree with us and they want to challenge us and they want to come up. We'd love to have you all as well. And if you all have your questions, definitely send them in. There are a few that I've already gotten that are carryovers that later on in the show we will definitely tackle as a team. But yeah, if you brothers are ready, we will dive in. Thrilled and pumped to be here with you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's do it. And this is like the greatest hits of insights we've had in the past. So, William, you're familiar with, I think, a whole bunch of them. But in case you're not, we'll
add. You're telling me you added more. You added more then.
Yeah, maybe.
Did you?
We'll see.
All right, we'll see. I think you did, man. I think you're going to really surprise me. And either which way, look, man, it's a Monday. I can't think of a better way to be spending my afternoon than hanging out with you guys, man. So
absolutely
thrilled and pumped, man. Can't think of any better way. Let us rock and roll. Let's dive in. Here we go. Sundry problems for Protestantism on the canon. What do you mean, Gary? You mean to tell me that Josephus, who has been a famous beating boy for Protestants for the longest time, that because of what we've been presenting, they can continue to use him, but it won't be very good at the end result. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, actually, yeah, you'll see. If Josephus was a ship, I think the ship has a lot of holes in it.
There you go. Do we want to give a shout out to the brother AB, who, by the way, brother AB is phenomenal when it comes to the issue of the canon. We love AB dearly. He says, God bless you, fam. We love you, AB. AB, I have to say, slowly becoming very, very sharp. He is already sharp in the canon, but he's slowly, the guy is sharp all the way around and many, many issues. AB, keep it up, brother. You are great. All right, let's dive in. Here we go. You want me to read that?
Yeah.
Did it come up for you? No, you can't see.
Yeah, it came up for me. Yep.
Okay, you got it. Okay. Let me know if you want to go over it. You want me to read it? Whatever you want.
So I tried to do this by category. So here's the setup. This is the laid up books in the temple.
Yeah.
And of course, this is Roger Beckwith, classic Protestant apologetic. He's the one that kind of promoted this laid up idea, although it's found elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so, if you want to read this, it's a little lengthy, but
that's fine. Yeah, let's do it. I don't mind reading. Okay, books laid up in the temple. The laying up of something in the temple had the effect of dedicating it to God. So gave it an additional sanctity. The Greek verb anakaimai, which Josephus in two passages quoted below, uses of the scriptures, laid up in the temple, is borrowed from pagan usage. However, in the religion of the Old Testament, one could only dedicate to God what was acceptable to him, and was in that sense already designated as holy. Hold on, let me do that. Was already designated as holy. Prior to being dedicated, writings of divine origin, or at least of sacred subject matter, were naturally conceived to fall within this category of acceptable items. How many writings or copies of the writings kept or used in the temple were actually written in the temple? One cannot be sure. The particular expression laid up in the temple suggests writings produced elsewhere, and scribes of the New Testament times were usually laymen. On the other hand, the priestly and Levitical genealogies were doubtless compiled at the temple, and the scribes of the temple, to whom Josephus twice refers, may have been responsible both for compiling these and for renewing and correcting the temple copies of the scriptures. Such correcting being referred to in the Mishnah, such correcting being referred to in the Mishnah. There we go.
Okay. And then the next slide, he gives the examples in Josephus of books that are laid up in the temple. Yeah. So the idea is that only sacred books are laid up in the temple. They're divine, right?
Yep.
So by de facto, all the books that were laid up are canonical scripture. And then he shows here, actually, I'll just sum it up. I don't think we have to read all of it. Sure. If you could go back one.
You want me to go to the next one? My bad. Okay, I didn't know you were ready for me to go to that one. Okay.
Yeah, so here it is, and you can see he has the Torah and Joshua. Okay.
Yeah.
And then this is the Antiquities of the Jews 66:4-6. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, there's other things that are laid up in the temple. And this is something that David jumped in on the member stream, and we were talking about.
Oh, I love that, David. Maybe y'all can break that down. And the only reason I say maybe we can make this the definitive show on Josephus, to where if anybody, they want to toss out Josephus, we can point them to this particular video, and it is the end all. Maybe you all can lay that out, because as we know very well, I got to tell you, another zombie to where you hack it down, Gary. Imagine, Gary, I am very old school. I'm so old school that I remember the Atari system, then the Nintendo system. I think of those zombies that you would hack down with that little, I don't know, what was it, 8-bit pixel sword in the Nintendo. And, right. And then the zombie would just, just reproduce and get back up. This is one of those zombies, isn't it, Gary?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So, David, you want to take it from here as far as the Antiquities quotes?
You know what? You can read, because anyway, you have much better pronunciation both, and you included also Barclay, I think, right? His comment.
Yeah. Well, yes, I do. Yep. So this is Barclay translation from Brill, and I give you the Greek from the Nice. So it says, the prophet said, "This is the one whom God has given you as your king. See how superior he is to all, and all how worthy of rule. When the people acclaimed the king's safely, the prophet wrote down for them the things that were to happen and read these things and read these as the king listened. He placed the book in the tent of God as a witness to what he had predicted for later generations.
Yeah, so yesterday we were actually talking about, as Gary said, uh, about this argument that books actually that are laid up in the temple are said by many Protestant apologists that, okay, so these are certainly inspired because otherwise they would not be laid up in the temple. And then we were talking about, like, okay, what books actually Josephus mentions, and usually people say that it's the Torah and Joshua, but actually here Samuel has his own book laying up in the temple. So I was just, yesterday talking about that. Perhaps we or some scholars could have missed this, or I don't know if or we missed it, but
Yeah.
you always need to research and go over again and over again, and sometimes you find something else as well. So we have Samuel laying up his own book in the temple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the problem with me is I tried to search the laid up stuff, and I was using a lexical search.
Yeah.
But if that word doesn't come up in the lexical search, like I don't believe
Mm.
it comes up here. I don't see it, Kayumai. Then obviously I don't know about it. But he still places it in the temple. He just doesn't lay it up in the temple, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Exactly.
yeah. So if you could go to the next slide, I think this is Barclay's footnote for this.
William, can you next slide?
Are y'all able to hear me? Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah.
I apologize, guys. Sorry, guys. My bad. I was actually giving a shout out to Gary 2.0, and I was talking because my thing was actually muted. I apologize, guys.
No problem.
Shout out to Gary 2.0, man. Over there in the Apocrypha Apocalypse. Thank you for your support, brother. God bless you, brother. Sorry about that, guys. I was muted there.
No
All
problem.
right.
No problem.
Let's go to the next one. Here we go. All righty. Let's dive in. Hold on. Let me see.
Okay, so here's the footnote for Barclay. He says, 1 Samuel 10:25 AB, Samuel simply lays the book up before the Lord. Josephus replaces this vague indication with the mention of a specific locale, i.e., the tent of God. See the references for having been erected at Shiloh in Antiquities 568, 343. He likewise supplies a rationale for such a storing of the book, i.e., its projected witness, quote unquote, for later generations concerning the predictions, quote unquote, Samuel had just made on these, the content of the book, address, see note 2, were to happen in 6.66. Josephus' presentation of Samuel's initiatives here further serves to associate him with both Moses and Joshua, whose respective documents concern the future, are both laid up in the temple. So I'm actually a little unclear, David. Do we know what exactly this thing is that's laid up by Samuel?
Yeah, I was wondering about it.
Yeah.
What is very clear that that the author of that is Samuel himself. However, we don't know the content.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a little bit problematic because we will see later in these presentations, right, Gary, that you can have some prophets who, according to Josephus, wrote not one book, but some more books,
Right.
who we would expect to have written just one book. So this by itself doesn't really prove that First and Second Samuel was actually laid up in the temple.
Yeah.
It's assumed, but we cannot prove it from text. That's correct, Gary.
Yeah, this seems to be very specific about something that's predictive
Mhm.
and associated with the king. So I don't know, but it's intriguing. Like, what exactly is this thing laid up? But let's continue to the next slide because I think the other one is even more important.
Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight with this book being laid up by Samuel. As you can see, guys, we're fair to the evidence. So
Yeah,
if
sure.
if we find something that really, uh, let's say, it's not really supporting outside our side, because now Protestants might say, "Oh, look, it's also Samuel's book which is laid up in the temple." That
Yeah.
would indicate that also the prophets would laid up in the temple. Well, actually the argument doesn't work, even though we are fair with the evidence and we will show you everything we can or we researched. But actually there's a hole in the narrative, and this is it actually.
Yeah.
You want
Okay.
me to go ahead and read that, brother? You
Yeah,
want me to
go
read that?
ahead, William. You
Definitely,
read
yeah.
better than I do.
No, not at all. Antiquities 10. It happened at this time, same time, the Syrian king had written communications to Zacchaeus, in which he said that he was foolish to think that he would escape slavery under himself, who had subjugated many and great nations. He threatened to utterly destroy him once he had taken him, if he did not open the gates on his own initiative and receive his army into Jerusalem. When Hezekiah read these things, he felt contempt on account of the confidence he had received from God. Rolling up the communications, he deposited them inside the sanctuary.
Uh-huh. So here we well, actually, David, why don't you take it?
Yeah, so what happens here is the famous battle between Sennacherib and the king Hezekiah, right? Or I would
Yep.
say this battle actually didn't happen because God rescued his people himself. And so Sennacherib, the Assyrian king who overruled everyone, and it's now really just Judea left, or Jerusalem, I should say. Then this king, this fiery king, is sending a letter to Hezekiah, right, to surrender. But Hezekiah, what does he do? He's going to lay up this letter from Sennacherib, the Assyrian king, right in the sanctuary, in the temple. In other words, there's a problem, because what Beckwith was suggesting, that whatever is laid up in the temple, that already is granted some sanctity. So it means that's already sacred scripture, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And notice, I just noticed that it's actually plural writings.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty big right there.
Yep. So to me, okay, there's one of two things, right? You could say, well, this was laid up in the temple, but it didn't survive, right? It was removed. It wasn't part of the divine posit. I think that this was the text, wasn't it? That was, we had some pushback from members.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like, well, maybe that was true before the exile, but after the exile, it wasn't there or something like that.
Man,
But
I wish I would have joined for that member stream. It sounds like it was a rocking one, man.
oh, it was great. We got such great, just great chat room. I mean,
Yeah.
really, really well educated chat room. But anyway, but David pointed out quite brilliantly that what this shows is that it wasn't exclusively sacred text that was laid up, right?
Yeah.
Since this is just a letter from a pagan, right? And so that shows that being laid up isn't really a technical term for only scripture. Other things were laid up as well.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, whatever you read in Josephus, that what was laid up in the temple, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary and William, but isn't that always about the first temple?
Yeah.
So Joshua being laid up.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't see a problem if the Torah was laid up in the second temple, but we don't see Samuel laying up his own book in the second temple. That's certainly not happening. So that also refers just to the first temple. And when Hezekiah is laying up the letters of the Assyrian king, okay, that's also just the first temple. It might not have been necessary in the second temple, but the argument still is defiled, because how could Hezekiah, who wasn't a priest king, if I'm correct, how could he lay up these letters in the temple? And Hezekiah was no random king in Jerusalem. He was very famous, very noble, is presented very brightly in the Bible. So, I mean, that's problematic, whichever way you try to go around this passage.
Yeah, and remember what Beckwith says too, that he made this big point about the pagans wouldn't lay something up unless it was already sacred and considered divine.
Yep.
Well, is this considered divine? The letter from a Syrian king?
Yep,
I would say no, right? But it is laid up in the temple.
Yeah.
exactly.
That's a really good point. Really, really good point.
All right. So, yeah, I think we're done with that one.
Yeah, here we go.
And that brings us to another important Josephus argument that's often made. Oh, wait, no, I forgot about the footnote. Here's the footnote in Barclay just to be complete. Compare 2 Kings 19:14b, Isaiah 37:14b, where Hezekiah goes in person to the house of the Lord and spreads Sennacherib's letter before the Lord on Sennacherib's written communications to Hezekiah, see 10:15. So basically, it just confirms and shows you the scriptures.
Great point. If you brothers don't mind, I want to take a little break just to tackle a great question we got in. Okay. A really good one from Abel, man. Abel, God bless you, brother. And if you all have questions, send them in. We will tackle them for you. Abel says, and he's playing devil's advocate, well, your counsels sometimes contradict. Sometimes we see 72 books or other times 73. How on planet Earth are you going to respond? You guys want me to take the first stab, or either of you all? Go for it, David. You seem like you wanted to tackle.
Yeah, William, I wanted to ask you guys, do you know which book is missing when it comes to the 72?
Yeah, that's the question I had.
Right.
Is it Baruch or the epistle?
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
Rolled up together.
Baruch with the epistle. Yeah.
Okay. Or Esdras. It could go that way too.
Right. Yeah. So here's the way you're going to answer that, Abel. When you look at our councils, Hippo Carthage, the Florentine Canon, Tridentine Canon, doesn't matter where you look, whether they're local or whether they're ecumenical, they are all affirming the same body of books, all of them, including the Deuterocanon. All of them. That is how you begin. That is how you answer it. So the contents of the canon, that is always consistent. Now, what about maybe we've got different numbering? That can vary depending on how the books are grouped. But what matters is the contents. The contents does not differ. Meaning, let's just say, let me just give one particular example. Let's say there were many books that are rolled up together. Is the canon different then because multiple books are rolled up together? No, the content remains the very same. What would differ would be how the books are grouped together. For instance, maybe somebody's combining 1st and 2nd Samuel into one. Does that change the text or the contents? No. What remains completely stable is that every council, Hippo Carthage, 3rd Constantinople, Florence, Trent, it doesn't matter where you look, where you go, they're affirming the same inspired books. The content is identical. Really, the only thing that would vary, and there's nothing wrong with that, would be the way that they're counting them, the way that they're grouping them would really be the only thing there. Anything to add to that, brothers? Anything to add to that?
I would just say, just like the Jews, you'll have a 22 book computation, 24 book computation, 27 book computation, yet it's all the same, or usually the same.
Right.
It's there for
right. Yep.
Yeah, and the reason why these North African councils don't list Baruch is because for the West there was no Baruch.
Right.
They constantly used it as Jeremiah, because in the Old Latin, the Vetus Latina, there was no Baruch.
Yeah.
It was one unified text, Jeremiah, Baruch, the letter, and Lamentations, and everything was under the heading Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it would be wrong to list Baruch in the North African councils, because for the Latin fathers, when they talked about the book of Baruch, they were speaking about this book, that meant an apocryphal book of Baruch. So we have at least 3 examples from fathers who cite something as Baruch, and it's an apocryphal work. So actually, you always need to look at these lists on their own, in their own milieu and their own time.
Oh
And
yeah.
in the 5th century and 4th century, simply the book of Baruch in the Latin West, that was an apocryphal book, and everybody consistently, without an exception, everybody called it Jeremiah. Now there are some few exceptions, but that's not regarding actually how the book was viewed by the West, but rather when Augustine speaks about Baruch, he says it's generally called Jeremiah, but some people attribute it to Baruch, to his
Yeah.
secretary, and that's because right next to Carthage you had, or in North Africa you had Alexandria, where they used it as Baruch, but that already belonged to the East. And so probably Augustine was aware of this, that, okay, some of these Greeks rather say this is Baruch and not Jeremiah. But even in the Council of Ephesus, it is quoted as Jeremiah. So it was truly the mainstream way how to quote Baruch. It was Jeremiah.
Really good answers. Those are very, very good. And I was able to find these images that I had made before. Really good point there, just uh, to really hammer home your point there on the Great Augustine. Yeah, we can actually look into Augustine. We can see what Augustine says, and to me, this is great. So we can look at Augustine, and if you notice here, he actually tells you that this is what does he say? And what Jeremiah says of wisdom plainly applies to Christ. And then, of course, what is he quoting from? Quoting from Baruch. Quoting from Baruch. You're very well aware of that quote, David. And that isn't the only one. It right here. He found out all the way of knowledge and gave it to Jacob his servant, and Israel his beloved. Afterwards he was seen upon the earth and conversed with men. There you go. Look at what he says right there. So yeah, really good points.
Yeah, and there's a particular passage where he says, some critics attribute this passage not to Jeremiah, but to the scribe Baruch.
Yes.
But the more prevailing opinion ascribes it to the former.
Yeah.
So that was the mainstream way how to cite Baruch. It was basically Jeremiah up till the 8th century, at least in the West, and that's really just really late when it starts to being used as Baruch. And another exception is Jerome, who says the book of Baruch is not among the Hebrews.
Mm-hmm.
And he is aware of that some of these cited as Baruch because Jerome was working with Origen's hexapla, and Origen probably had it under Baruch, because Origen is really the first figure in history who starts to ascribing the text to Baruch and not to Jeremiah. So that's why, basically.
Yeah, very good point. Really, really good points. Okay. Here we go, against Appian. Among us, there are not thousands of books in disagreement and conflict with each other, but only 22 books containing the record of all time, which are rightly trusted. 5 of these are the books of Moses, which contain both the laws and the tradition from the birth of humanity up to his death. This is a period of a little less than 3,000 years. From the death of Moses until Artaxerxes, king of the Persians, and Xerxes, the prophets after Moses wrote the history of what took place in their own times in 13 books. The remaining 4 books contain hymns to God and instructions for people on life. You are muted, Gary. You are muted, brother.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all.
Yeah, so this is the setup for the next quote, the Tony Esto quote.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So Josephus is very firm. There's 22 books. Now, notice he doesn't list the books or identify what these books are. He just simply says there's 5 books of Moses. We can assume that's the Torah, right?
Yeah.
And he says it covers from creation to the death of Moses. And then he says from Moses to Artaxerxes, the king of Persians after Xerxes, the prophets after Moses record history in 13 books. So we don't know what these 13 books, but they record contemporary history.
Yeah.
And then the remaining 4 books are hymns to God and instructions people on life. Again, he doesn't tell us what these books are. He just gives numbers.
Yeah.
And Protestants appeal to this and they say, 22 books. The Jews are always talking about 22 books or 24 books or 27 books, like I mentioned earlier. So that must be the Protestant canon, he's affirming, right?
Yep.
And we've gone over this. William, you in debates have pummeled people on the counting of the 22, whether
I love when they bring it up. I love it.
yeah, and even scholars today, there's disagreement. Is this all the proto-canonical books? Is it missing maybe 1 or 2 books? I mean, I have different computations, which brings up the Tony Esto quote. I always give him a props because for some reason I didn't notice this. Then Tony brought it up in an email, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I'll have to look into it. But like the more I thought about it, the more it's like, hey, well, hold on a second. This is pretty important. I just didn't realize it. But he kept bugging me, so I wanted to give a shout out to Tony. He was persistent.
We love Tony.
Yeah,
I have to correct you, Gary. It's Joey Esto.
Joey. I always say Tony. It's Joey Esto. You're right.
Tony. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's his brother has it. His brother's Tony or something.
Tony.
Joey Esto. I got to remember.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me.
No problem.
Sorry about that, Joey. Okay, next slide. This is the quote. And actually, I added a little extra to this quote just because it's one of those head scratchers. Yeah, William, if you could advance.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, you want me to go to the next one?
No. This is it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have a little bit of a delay on my end.
No worries at all. Here we go. Likewise, the prophet. You want to read
go
it?
ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Composed a funeral dirge for him, which endures down to this day. The prophet proclaimed in advance the terrible things that awaited the city. He also left behind writings about its capture in our own time and the destruction of Babylon. Nor did he alone foretell these things to the mob. There was also the prophet Ezekiel, who left behind 2 books, that he was the first to write about these matters. Look at that. The prophet Ezekiel left behind 2 books.
Yeah, so I'll do the first part, and then David can expound on the second part.
Yes.
Or you could, William. I just put this one just because it's interesting that he says Jeremiah left behind writings, plural. And, it seems to be, of course, Jeremiah and Lamentations, because this is speaking about a lament that is included in Lamentations.
Yeah.
But it's also, I wonder if there's more, It kind of opens the door to, would he include Baruch in the epistle, maybe? It all depends on how it was divided up and whether he would have that thing. So I put in just because it's interesting. He says that it isn't just Jeremiah or Jeremiah Lamentation. He just has it very vague as writings. Okay, now the Joey Esto argument, if you would, David.
Yeah, sure. So as we all know that Ezekiel, or in our Bibles, there's only 1 book of Ezekiel. And so people are wondering, what's this second book, right? So scholars are debating, okay, is this an apocryphal second book of Ezekiel, which we don't have in the Bible?
Yeah.
Or is it something else? Some scholars suggested that it's still the 1 book of Ezekiel, but broken down into 2 books. And they try to argue it from the Talmud that there might be some kind of division in the past in this book. However, even if that would be the case, Josephus still counts it as 2.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's a distinction without a difference.
Yeah. Tuton Dua Biblus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no doubt. 2 books.
So it doesn't matter whether you have one canonical Ezekiel and one apocryphal Ezekiel,
Yeah.
or you have one canonical Ezekiel broken down into 2. It doesn't matter. What matters is the number.
Yeah.
And once Josephus says there are 2, then there are 2 books of
Yeah.
Ezekiel. So counting the 22, now you have a problem because you just cannot fit even this other Ezekiel into the 22 because everything's closed, everything's jam-packed. Ezra must be with Nehemiah, and we will get to that as well. You need to combine this First and Second Samuel, First, Second Kings, Jeremiah with Lamentations, Judges with Ruth, which is problematic because the first attestation of dividing Judges from Ruth comes from Origen, the 2nd to the 3rd century. That's pretty late.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So it's a bit anachronistic. So we cannot be really sure what he means by these 2 books, but where we are certainly sure that there were 2. And now you have to somehow calculate it into the 22, but you can't. It's just, there's no room for that,
Yeah.
In other words, Josephus must be missing some book from the Hebrew Bible, from the Tanakh as we know it today.
Yeah. Yeah. And on top of that, if you think about all the lists that are brought up, Melito, Cyril of Jerusalem, Athanasius, all the ones that give 22 or 24, none of them give 2 books of Ezekiel. It just doesn't fit in that computation. So, So like I said, some scholars, before even considering this particular quote, they think that Josephus is missing perhaps 1 or 2 books from the 22. So for sure, he's missing at least 2 or 3 books, which makes it 100 times worse.
Way worse. No matter which way you go, no matter what position, the fact that he is counting them as 2 books, even if you want to say you can, it's the same book being split up, and the fact that he's numbering them as 2, you are in a world of trouble as a Protestant if you're going to go with Josephus as holding to your canon of antiquity of the Old Testament. That just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. At least for sake, really, just Protestants shouldn't be abandoning this argument that the 22 must be identical. At least they should admit that there's a wiggle room, and we really cannot be sure what's the content of the 22.
Yeah.
But we can be sure that he counted Ezekiel twice.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for that, AB. William and David, a Tech Studio Wes Huff quote. It is too long. Yeah, it's the common spiel that you're going to always hear. Thank you for that. Does that come from his an actual book, or where exactly did you get that, brother? And let me read it on the air. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the support, brother. It's a very long one. Let me read it. Some further content and context on early canon listed a line and or approximate a 39 Old Testament canon, 39 book, where that comes from. Just a reminder that ancient Jewish lists match the modern Protestant 39 book canon, but the list the order differently. No, it doesn't. Get out of town, man. Yeah, the traditional Jewish count of 24 books emerges from, we know the way you break it down. Yeah. Josephus, who explicitly limits the books to 22, you're going to have trouble bringing up Josephus. He likely grouped historical writings of the prophets, treated Ruth and Lamentations as appendices to Judges and Jeremiah, respectively. How do you prove that, though?
You can't.
Gary, I got to pick your brain. How on earth do you prove that assertion?
Yeah,
How? You
Yeah,
can't.
you have to take later computations and read it back into Josephus with no justification other than you got to make these books fit the 22 count.
Yeah, and then you are really, that's just a total mess. Yeah, I dare say he's wrong. And if pressed on this, a Protestant's not going to be able to give a good answer, period. That's just a mess.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, you know what really is frustrating is that Westhoff is truly a scholar, and
Right.
on
Yeah,
nothing else than text and Bible and all this stuff. So he really should know better. And
you should.
it's embarrassing, you know, when I understand when this comes up in apologetics, but when this comes up in scholarship, that's just really bad.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it should be. It's unacceptable.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, this is not his lane. And every time he stumbles into canon information, it's always a train wreck.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I hate to be brutally honest, but every single time that I have seen him dip his feet into this particular area, it is always a mess. All the time.
Yep.
Yep. All right, let's continue. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the support, AB. And thank you for pointing that out, brother. Great point. Okay, here we go. Josephus' use of the plural writings here likely has in view the book of Jeremiah and that of Lamentations. On this enigmatic reference to Ezekiel's 2 books, see Marcus, who suggests that it refers. I think we already touched upon this, right, Gary?
Yeah. And the point is, whether it's like David said, if it's Ezekiel plus an apocryphal writing, like there is I forgot what it's called, but there is like an apocryphal Ezekiel that we found in Dead Sea. Whether it's that or it's Ezekiel counted as 2 books by splitting it, like Barclay says here.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because it's still 2 books that should be counted as one. And that throws the whole 22 book thing out the window.
Yeah, it does. No matter what, it's a complete mess. No matter what. Let's continue. Okay, against Appian. From Artaxerxes up to our own time, every event has been recorded, but this is not judged worthy of the same trust, since the exact line of succession of the prophets did not continue.
Okay, so this is again another setup. I've gone in depth on this. Guys, just do a search on the channel for Josephus against Appian and the exact succession of prophets. Now, usually that's interpreted as prophets ceased after the time of Esther or Ezra, and that would be, or Malachi. So that would be terminating the Protestant canon. And then there's, of course, the 400 years of silence, right? So Protestants generally interpret this line as there's no prophets during that period of 400 years after Ezekiel. So that brings up this other quote. And I've spoke about this before a long time ago, but I thought it's good just to introduce it since we're showing all these weird quirks with Josephus.
Yeah.
So if you
definitely
could go to the next slide.
Absolutely. Here we are.
And this is his War of the Jewish Wars. And it's in his introduction on 6. Sometimes it's paragraph 17. I don't know. Will you want to read that for us?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to remind the audience, if you all have questions, you can send them in. We'll tackle them. And I can tell them we have people back here as well. If you have a particular question for us, on the right-hand side, very easy, right over there, it says private chat. What is your faith and what is your question? We can't bring you up if you don't tell us. We have clear rules here. We want to make sure you're not a troll. Right there where it says private chat. What is your faith? What is your question? And we'll bring you up. We'd love to dialogue with you. To write concerning the antiquities of the Jews, who they were originally and how they revolted from the Egyptians and what country they traveled over and what countries they seized upon afterward and how they were removed out of them. I think this not to be a fit opportunity, and on other accounts also superfluous. And this because many Jews before me have composed the histories of our ancestors very exactly, as have some of the Greeks done it also, and have translated our histories into their own tongue, and have not much mistaken the truth in their histories. But then where the writers of these affairs and our prophets leave off, thence shall I take my rise and begin my history. Now, as to what concerns that war, what happened in my own time, I will go over it very largely, and with all the diligence I am able. But what preceded my own age, that I shall run over briefly. For example, I shall relate how Antiochus, who was named Epiphanes, took Jerusalem by force.
Okay. Now, what strikes me is first, he says that he's going to pick up his history of the Jewish war, namely the first Jewish revolt,
Yeah.
where the prophets leave off, right? So these are history writing prophets, okay? And he's going to pick up his history where the prophets left off. Now, if the last of the prophets was Artaxerxes, uh, Ezra, or Esther, we'd expect it to pick up right after Malachi, right
Right.
after
Yeah.
all these figures. But instead, what he does is he says, "I'm going to explain briefly what happens before the revolt." And what does he do? He starts off with the Maccabean period,
Yeah.
which to me suggests, and I don't think this is super firm, but I think it's highly suggestive that he believed the prophets, the history writing prophets, continued until Maccabees.
Yeah.
So, so that kind of this succession of prophets and prophecy, I think this calls into question. But like I
I
said,
agree.
I don't think it's a slam dunk, but I think it's highly suggestive.
Yeah, I think if you combine everything what Josephus says, then it really reaffirms that for him, prophecy and inspiration by extension was still uh, in continuation up till his time, because in the preface to the Antiquities, he does say that his Antiquities cover the history of 5,000 years, which Barclay
Right.
says
Mhm.
that would be well into his own time, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because otherwise it should be like 4,300. So 5,000 would be a gross over approximation.
Hmm.
And the second thing, indication, is that in the preface, he also says that his Antiquities is simply a translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek without adding anything or omitting anything. In other words, Josephus, I mean, of course, scholars don't take this that serious because he does sometimes paraphrase some things, so it's not really a word to word.
Mhm.
Right.
Even though, of course, we cannot be sure because we don't have those scriptures which Josephus had before him. So truly might be the case that what Josephus had before him was something a little bit different textually what we
Sure.
have today. So we don't necessarily have to say he was just paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But whichever way we take it, Josephus is very clear. He says, I'm not going to use anything else for my antiquities, just the Hebrew scriptures, and I'm going to translate it from Hebrew into Greek. In other words, whatever you find in antiquities, he claims to be scripture.
Yeah.
So that is in line, actually, Gary, with what you say, that really for Josephus, there is no cessation of prophecy at all.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. In fact, some scholars think Josephus actually thinks of himself as a history writing prophet.
Yeah.
yep. Yeah.
So,
And another problem I would say is that he's not focusing. We need to really think about this and read Josephus clearly. Josephus is not saying, I'm going to utilize each and every scripture. He says, I'm going to use history.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Even in against Appian, he says the 22 books contain history or
Yeah.
records of all time. But we know that not everything what's in the scriptures is history.
Yeah. That's
So
correct.
Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs is not history.
Yeah.
Now you might see some of these genres being not being historical, but for example, the Psalms, which are called hymns by
Hmm.
Josephus and Philo as well, they call it hymns to God, but not psalms. Now, these hymns or psalms, of course, do contain some history here and there. Some of the psalms are historical. They're talking about David and other historical figures. So it's natural that he would use these as well for the purpose of writing down history or translating it into Greek.
Hmm.
But you cannot use some other books which have zero history in there, like Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs. In other words, that's truly not striking when scholars point out that Josephus doesn't even hint or allude or absolutely doesn't use these two books. And that's why many scholars, I'm going to show it in the presentation later on, that truly many scholars don't believe that among the 22 you find Ecclesiastes, a Song of Songs, because they don't contain history at all.
Yeah.
But if we follow the description of Agenstapion, that's not surprising.
Right.
I'm not sure how they would even argue that they contain history. I'm not sure how they would even deal with that. I've tried to steelman that argument for their position. There simply just is no way.
And Gary, there's a problem with the book of Job as well, right?
Yeah. Well, Job, scholars point out, seems to be before the patriarch.
Yeah.
So Moses includes
I
that
think we're
period.
losing Gary.
Ah,
It's got to be Gary's internet.
yeah.
You there, Gary?
I'm here.
There you
Can
go.
hear me? Okay.
We got you there.
Yeah.
You're back. You're back now. Yeah.
The internet dropped out. Yeah. So
Okay,
where
you're
do you
back.
put Job? If there's 5 books that chronicle creation to the time of Moses, and the Torah's 5 books, but Job chronicles that period, is Job part of the list?
Right.
And if he is, it squeezes yet another book, out of the computation.
I know some scholars try to fit it into instructions on life,
Mm-hmm.
which could be somehow, but I'm not sure about it. But yeah, that's true. I mean, certainly, I think Job is the third book which is not cited by Josephus at all. And I think again, we can make a very good argument for why he doesn't do it. Because what is he doing? He is laying up the history of the Jews. Now, there are actually Jews who would say that Job wasn't a Jew.
Right.
Moreover, Jerome points out that Job, when he was examining the scriptures and translating them, Jerome points out that Job is written in a different style or different language, very similar to Arabic, right? And so Job might have truly lived before Moses, when there were no Jews, right?
Yeah.
And even in the Job, we read that he was living in the region of Uz, which is not really in Israel, and that is not surprising. Because God can really call people or call from other nations to prophesy or write down scripture. That's not really something exclusive for Job. But moreover, we know that Job was certainly not following the Mosaic law.
There you go.
Because he gave inheritance to daughters among his sons.
Yeah.
And that would be a transgression of the Mosaic law.
Yeah. He shows really no awareness of it, which would get to your point that you bring up, that he is before Moses. I definitely agree with that. And a lot of scholarship would point that out as well. You'll find that if you read Josephus, that would be very clearly out of line if he was under the Mosaic covenant. You don't even hear of Israel as a nation. Nope. It isn't mentioned there. There's nothing about the covenant at Sinai. That kind of, somebody might argue and come back and say, well, that's an argument from silence. But I would go and say that it's much deeper than that, because if he's living after Moses, you would expect some kind of awareness of the law. There's none, or some kind of awareness of the layout of the structure of the covenant. There's nothing there at all.
Yeah. It doesn't mention the temple at all.
Yeah,
he's not aware of it. Moreover, he certainly lived for a long time, because he serves children, then he's got these problems with the devil, and then he lost everything.
Yeah.
And then he serves more like bunch of other children, and he lives even longer. So I think he sees his grandchildren or something. He certainly lived like more than 100 years, which is really close to how the ancient patriarchs lived, or that's how they're described in the Bible. So again, that's another indication that Job really lived before Moses. And so, but why I don't think that Job is really among the 22. Again, if Job really wasn't part of the Jewish people, which it's not something, again, striking. If he really lived in the region of Uz, okay, so be it. But he was still inspired. God can inspire whoever he wants, right?
Mhm.
And so that's not problematic. And why I don't think so, it's certainly not among the books of Moses. It's not among the prophets, because Job wasn't living after. He was before Moses, not after Moses. And certainly it's not in the instructions on human life, because again, if it were, then Josephus would mention Job somewhere in the Antiquities, because the Antiquities, or the 22 books, must reflect what we see in the Antiquities, and we don't see it there.
Yeah.
Great point. Really, really good point. Anything to add to that, Gary?
No, not at all.
All right, let's go to the next one. All right. You want me to go ahead and read that?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Now, if anyone consider these things, he will find that God takes care of mankind, and by all ways possible foreshows to our race what is for their preservation, but that men perish by those miseries which they madly and voluntarily bring upon themselves. For the Jews, by demolishing the tower of Antoniah, had made their temple foursquare, while at the same time they had written in their sacred oracles that then should their city be taken, as well as their holy house, when once their temple should become foursquare. But now, what did the most elevate them in undertaking this war was an ambiguous oracle that was also found in their sacred writings, how about that time one from their country should become governor of the habitable earth. The Jews took this prediction to belong to themselves in particular, and many of the wise men were thereby deceived in their determination. Now, this oracle certainly denoted the government of Vespasian, who was appointed emperor in Judea.
So what is really significant about this passage is, in which we find in War, chapter 6, is that Joseph is clearly talking about sacred oracles, sacred writings,
Yes.
which the Jews took as predictions, prophecy, but they misinterpreted. That was the problem. But they actually recognized this passage as prophecy, as sacred scripture. But the problem is that it's nowhere found in the Tanakh. It's
Right,
just, it doesn't exist. In other words, Josephus again has a text which he recognizes, or would say the Jews recognized in his time as scripture, but we don't find it in the Tanakh.
Yeah.
So we have another problem. If you go to the next slide, actually, Steve Mason affirms that here certainly Josephus is talking about sacred scripture of the Jews, because he says, although Josephus speaks less often of oracles, all 12 occurrences of those terms also hail from the distant past of Judea, and come from the holy books and ancient prophets.
Yeah.
So again, where would this fit in?
Yeah.
Okay, we can go to the next slide.
I want to give a shout out to the brother AB. Thank you for your support, my brother. He says all they're doing is trying to combine books to fit their narrative in ways that go against the tradition Josephus speaks of. Look, let me be clear with you all, the audience. They love bringing up Josephus because that is what they hear will work. But I can tell you right now, they cannot deal with Josephus when you actually read him. When you spend time reading him and reading the scholarship, they get completely discombobulated. They are unable to really deal with Josephus. You're 1,000% right, AB. And AB, shout out to AB. He says, for you, Gary 1.0, man. God bless you, man. Shout out. Thank you for the support. For Gary on the Apocryphal Apocalypse, AB, thank you for supporting, for helping out with ministry. We are able to do what we do here because of support from people like you. Thank you so much, brother, for your support. And I do want to remind people, we do have people back here And we have had people back here, but for some reason, I am speaking a language they don't understand. So the language that they don't understand might be English. And I've said, what is their faith and what is their question? And apparently they don't know how to answer. So hopefully they will get to that ability to answer it. I speak other languages. If you guys don't want to answer in English, I can speak German and I can speak Spanish. So if you prefer actually answering in Spanish to let me know your faith and your persuasion, well, then maybe I can bring you up then. Until you give us any indication, can't bring you in then. All righty, let's continue diving in, faithful. I go for guys.
Yeah, so we can go to the next slide.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go.
No problem. So here I just want to flesh out some of the scholars who really speculate or are wondering which books are missing from the 22. Mm-hmm. So here we have Zeitlin from 1931, who says the book of Ecclesiastes and Esther were added later because later to those 22 books. Mm-hmm. Now, I would disagree here a little bit with Zeitlin because I think Esther is there because Josephus cites it, but Josephus is using the longer version of Esther, not the shorter one. So that would be another problem, of course, for Protestantism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We can go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. Then we have Wolfenson. He says the reckoning of 24 books as 22 did not appear until after 100. We cannot therefore assume that Josephus counted 24 books as 22. When he says 22, he means 22. Josephus must have excluded Canticles and Ecclesiastes. So again, we have a clear passage here from this scholar that, and again, the same books, Ecclesiastes, Song of Song, naturally, because these don't have any history in them. And of course, it says that Ruth and Lamentations would be separated. They would not be, coupled together with Jeremiah and Judges. And he also says that the Jews did not have a fixed classification of prophets and writings. Further, we have Gretz. He says Song of Songs and maybe Ecclesiastes are omitted. So another one. So we can go to this next slide.
Wow, yeah.
It appears to me, however, that since most of the essay against Apion is concerned with the issue whether or not the Jews possess authentic, accurate historical records written in terms that a contemporary historian may appreciate, Josephus is referring to historical compositions exclusively. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about. In Against Apion, he clearly says, no, these are just histories which I am talking about. Those 22 books are only histories. He's not saying this is the whole canon. Why would he? That's not the point of Against Apion. Of the Antiquities of the Jews. It's pointless.
Yeah, if I could add something really quick, right before he gives the list, he makes it a point to say that it's through inspiration the prophets were given knowledge of times past, most distant past, and contemporary events. So when he confines inspiration only to writing historical events, right? Mm-hmm. If that is the definition, then you would wonder whether he would consider the hymns to be inspired, right? Because or instructions in life, is that inspired? It's not writing history. So but it's a very narrow definition of inspiration.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I never thought about this, Gary. That's interesting. Yeah. And we know Josephus was a historian. He's not dealing with canon. He's dealing with history.
Sure.
That's his point, right?
Yeah.
Why would he present canon? Everybody know. I mean, everybody knew Josephus was really just a historian at this point.
Excuse me.
And we have next one. We have from the Nahum Sarna. Sorry.
This
one more time. Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
So this is from the Encyclopedia Judaica. So this is Jewish encyclopedia. It says from about the same period derives a variant tradition of Josephus limiting the canon to 22. It is possible that Song of Songs and Ecclesiastes were not yet included in the Josephus's Bible. Again, same two books.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. By the way, we do have a quick question. if we could tackle it. It was asked by, and I promised her we'd get to it, by Elena Littleflower. I don't think she's tuning in, but I'll give her the timestamp and I'll let her know we took it for her. And there was a question asked for her in her OCIA class, and I want to give her a shout out. Praise the Lord, she's almost done with OCIA. We're so happy for her. She was asking if this was a sufficient answer. Why did the Council of Trent dogmatically define the canon in 1545? And then the answer given to her was that Trent was responding to Protestants in the 16th century who rejected some of the biblical canon that had been accepted and used by the church for about 1500 years. Now, what I would note, and you gentlemen, you brothers, let me know what your thoughts are. The canon was already defined before Trent. Long before Trent, the church had already identified and affirmed the canon in what I would call multiple authoritative ways. Multiple ways. Even if we simply say that those councils earlier of Hippo and Carthage are local and regional, the church elevated that status very early on. So papal authority had very clearly already affirmed well before Trent. Pope St. Innocent had done so. And the canon was used. The deuterocanonical books were utilized all throughout history well before we ever even get to Trent. Now, what happens at Trent, so the answer is partially correct. What happens at Trent is there is that crisis, as Elaine is aware of the Protestant Reformation, where Luther and others would call into question the status of the deuterocanonical books, and it was a serious issue at the time. So what Trent does is Trent reiterates what Florence had already done beforehand, but it does something different now. And you all can definitely correct me, and you can give me your thoughts on what you think about this. But what is done differently now is an anathema is attached. Now, that had not been done beforehand. Rightly so, an anathema is attached. And and that is one of the things that is done differently. Gary or David, anything to add to that? Any particular thoughts to add to that?
I would say that Trent, the reason they brought up the canon was because they wanted to define the sources from which they're going to reaffirm other doctrines. So that was on their docket. The reason they attached the anathema was because there were Catholics that were denying both Old and New Testament books.
Yeah.
Like Cajetan would definitely be one. And of course, remember, not only did Luther demote the Deuterocanon in the Old Testament, but he also called into question, was it Hebrews, James, Jude, and Revelation.
Yeah.
So, but remember, the anathema is only for in-church people, not out-of-church people. So this was really more of a disciplinary corrective. But like you said, William, I mean, the church had already defined as doctrine the canon back in the 4th century. It's been reiterated over and over again.
Yep.
And by the time Trent comes, it's like, hold on, we got some people, some very astute people that are also kind of going off the edge, but they're still within the fold. Let's put it in anathema.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's a great way you laid that out. Dealing with inner house issues as well. Trent didn't create the canon. Very clearly, the church had used, read, and taught from the canon for 1500 years. So at Trent, that is pretty much what's being done there. But so I'd say that the answer given there in OCIA, I'd say that it's partially correct there, but I think it could be elaborated upon and perhaps sharpened a little bit. What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
David, anything to add to that, David?
Yeah, I mean, typically, those who are critiquing Trent just don't understand how the magisterium works.
There you go.
And that's where I find the whole problem, because they think it's either a dogma or nothing.
Yeah, right.
But if that would be the case, then why having those other councils which didn't, or other canons which don't settle some issues dogmatically,
Yep.
So what's that good for? Now, of course, that's not how the church works. You don't need dogmas each and every time. Simply the church can say, look, this is it, and period. We don't have to attach anathemas and say this is a dogma and binding forever. It's just, okay, this is the latest thing you will have to do, but it's not a zero or not, or all or nothing. That's not actually the case. And if we listen to what Trent says, then the Council of Trent says that these are the books because these were handed down by succession from the apostles.
100%. Yep.
So whatever proclamation we have between the apostles and the Council of Trent, that is valid, even if it's not dogma, but that is part of that succession. So Trent, how did the fathers of Trent know what's the canon? Because they know what was handed down, what was proclaimed before them. So that's an appeal to these other councils like Florence, North African councils, Pope Innocent. These are just as important as the Council of Trent. This is the very problem within Protestantism, that they miss this whole picture, what we're appealing to actually. It's not like Trent somehow, as you said, Gary, it's now we're going to invent the canon.
Right. Delusional.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Great point. Fantastic answer, brothers. Let's continue, definitely. And audience, if you all have any questions, send them in. We still have a few more minutes. We still have, I think, how good are you all for time? You guys have like half an hour or so?
I could probably do another 10 or 15.
Okay. What about you, David?
Yeah, sure. And this is just a few slides.
Perfect.
Just to complicate the issue even more.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's complicate the issue even more. Oh, my bad. You know what, audience? I am so sorry. My eyeballs failed to notice we got the incredible brother Gary 2.0 backstage. I'm so sorry. Gary 2.0, brother, forgive me there. I barely noticed you were there, my friend.
No problem. Thank you for letting me visit for a bit.
Glad
this is only a quick little visit.
Awesome. Yeah.
By the way, we had about 3 or 4 inches of snow yesterday. It was very rude.
Wow. What's going on, man? What's going on?
Melted. It's all gone. Thank goodness. The next day, but it was rude. I got a little thought experiment for you.
Yeah.
This is okay. So I put a little quote in there about this week. Okay, that's pardon me. It was his group. This is for Zechariah in the temple, the husband of Elizabeth. This week, let's see. It was his group time to serve. That means he had a schedule. And according to the custom of the priest, he was chosen to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. Okay. So what I'm getting at here is there was a schedule. I don't think they had spreadsheets like we did, but there was a schedule. There was a schedule for who did the incense. Mm-hmm. The Levites had schedule for singing, who's doing the sacrifices. So that may not be canon, but that was also in the temple, mm-hmm. along with the letter from the king you were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah. And
I would say they probably had some hymnals or songbooks there. I would say they would have some bookkeeping information there and pays and who gets paid. So there was a lot of documents in the temple. Have you ever been on a parish council? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So and that temple was quite big. So I think there was a lot of documents in that temple, not just some manuscripts. So I think there's something there about not everything in the temple was canon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he says that he laid the priestly genealogies are also in the temple. Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just a little thought experiment I wanted to bring up with you guys because...
Thank you, brother. Thank you for your thoughts, brother.
Being in the temple doesn't mean you're canon.
Right. Thank you, brother. Thank you for that, my friend.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the members hangout that we did Sunday, I have a feeling that the stuff that was laid up in the temple was there for practical purposes.
Sure. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what practical purpose would there be having Ecclesiastes laid up in the temple?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. See, Orthodox Phillips here just saying hi. I got myself one of the, I don't know if this is going to show. Oops.
I love that, man. Prayer rope.
I got the sort of like the Orthodox praying ones for the.
Yeah, we love that.
100. You sneak that in once in a while along with your rosary.
There you go, brother. There you go. Can't go
Well,
wrong
that's
with
all
them
I
both,
had.
brother.
Yeah, I wasn't going to hold you guys up, but I just wanted to bring not everything in the temple by default is going to be canon.
Right. Thank you for that, brother. God bless you, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks.
Have a great one, Gary. God bless you, brother. Always great talking with Gary 2.0, man. And shout out to AB over there at the Apocryphal Apocalypse. He says, I know we went over this, but on April the 8th, the canon of Scripture was made dogma unanimously. The anathema wasn't unanimous, which took place in February of 1546.
Mhm.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
True that.
Yep. Alrighty, let's continue. Josephus and the book of Esdras.
Esdras, my favorite topic.
You love it, man. You love it. I know you love it.
Right. So this is very important because Josephus is not using the canonical Ezra. He's using first Esdras, as we know it from the KJV, which is sometimes called Greek Esdras. In the Greek manuscripts, is called Esdras A, and it has some additional material, textual material to Ezra. And this is, for example, what Pullman says. Josephus was not aware of the juxtaposition of Ezra and Nehemiah as described in the canonical books. When he wrote his Antiquities, he could only rely on third Esdras, including the now lost ending corresponding to Nehemiah. The source he used to gather material about Nehemiah and his time had not yet been connected to the chronological historical work. Next slide, please.
Definitely.
This is what Tulan says. It is obvious that in general, Josephus used first Esdras. Of course, Josephus could have been influenced by the elegant and idiomatic language of first Esdras in contrast to the Greek of Ezra and Nehemiah, which was un-Greek, literal, and mechanical. The problem is that Josephus is not saying that he's using Greek. This is what Tulan misses, because Josephus says right in the preface, as I said to his Antiquities, he says he's going to translate the scriptures from Hebrew into Greek. He's not using Greek at all. At least that's not what Josephus himself claims to be doing, So this is one point what Tulan misses. But again, it's true. He is using something that was the Vorlage, or the text, in Hebrew, which was first Esdras, the original first Esdras, which is written in Hebrew. So we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
We have Itini and Nodeh, who really examine how Josephus used the biblical books. He says, for Ezra, Josephus' version is very close to first Esdras. He did not know first Esdras chapter 1, which was another translation of 2 Chronicles 35 to 36. Because we know that first Esdras begins with these two last chapters of 2 Chronicles, but instead he begins a little bit later. He's not starting with 2 Chronicles. He says the contest of the bodyguards shows that both dependent on the same Hebrew source. You see, he used Hebrew source, not Greek, Hebrew. Okay? So he was translating it from the Hebrew into Greek. As for Nehemiah, Josephus' source is much shorter than the book. Nehemiah was mainly a builder, as at Sirach 49:13, which ignores Ezra. Yeah, it's another interesting feature of Josephus, that for him, the book of Nehemiah is much shorter. Many people think that he was just using the memoirs of Nehemiah and not the complete work of Nehemiah. We can go to the next slide. And here you can see the comparison of, so on the very left, you see the chapters in chapter 11 of Antiquities and, the various paragraphs. In the middle, you have how it corresponds to the Greek Esdras, and you can see that it follows very clearly, goes from chapter 1 up till chapter 9. When you compare it with Ezra, it just simply doesn't work, because first you have chapter 1, then you have chapter 4, then you have chapter 2, then you have chapter 3, then you have chapter 4. So clearly Josephus was following what we call today the Greek Esdras or first Esdras, but it was for him a text in Hebrew language, and it also included the additional story of the three bodyguards. And on the right side, you can see what he used from Nehemiah, and it's really just a couple of texts. You can go to the next slide. Even Beckwith says, for the part of the history covered by the book of Ezra, Josephus in his Antiquities almost invariably follows first Esdras instead. So he's not using the canonical Ezra. Geza Serovic and József Zsengele, who are Hungarian scholars, one is deceased already. This is what they say. We can suppose that he used the Septuagintal version of Esther. By Septuagintal, here the scholars mean that it was the longer version. Okay, it's the expanded version, which has the text not found in the Protestant Bibles, and First Ezra or First Esdras. He also mentioned the story that Darius's bodyguards and treated them as scripture.
Yeah.
We can go further to the next slide.
Uh-huh.
Moreover, Josephus used the prayer of Manasseh as scripture.
Wow.
As part of Second Chronicles. So again, if it's really you're going to appeal to, to Josephus's claim in against Apion, and you will say, okay, but it's from Moses to Artaxerxes. That's what inspired. Well, Second Chronicles falls into that, and as we can see, he considered prayer of Manasseh as genuine part of Second Chronicles. So got another problem here. Can go further to the next slide. And now, did Josephus use two independent books for the history described by Ezra and Nehemiah, or he used one book? So let's go to the next slide. So we already know that he used Esdras, First Esdras. The problem is there is zero evidence that First Esdras and Nehemiah were combined together into one book. We have counter-evidence only from manuscript traditions mainly, but also from lists. Moreover, there was one hypothesis or one theory that First Esdras is actually a fragment of a bigger work. And the theory goes like this. Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah were combined into one large book. And this is called the fragment theory, that First Esdras is a fragment of this large book because it begins with Chronicles and ends with Nehemiah. Now, this was already debunked by scholarship, and it's not valid anymore. First Esdras is a book on its own. It's not a fragment from a larger collection or a larger corpus. It's really one independent book, and it's a variant of the book of Ezra. So even Gallagher says, no Jewish author clearly knows this translation. Josephus relies on a source more similar to First Esdras. For the material on the return from exile and his material on Nehemiah, not contained in First Esdras, diverges widely from the translation called in Vaticanus Esdras B, suggesting the possibility of a separate source. We can go to the next slide. Garbini says, Flavius Josephus, in his paraphrase of these books, does not follow, as he usually does, the order of the Hebrew text, but uses different and distinct sources for Ezra and Nehemiah. We can go to the next slide. Meyer says that the second witness to the historical sequences of events in the period involved in is Josephus, Antiquities, chapter 11. It has often been observed that he follows the same order in general as prevails in First Esdras. 2 points may be noted here. The first is Ezra's reading of the law in the 7th month, as in Nehemiah chapter 8 and First Esdras. The second is the complete separation of Ezra and Nehemiah. In other words, these two were two independent books for Josephus. Let's go to the next slide. In passages of Josephus that concern Nehemiah and are absent from First Esdras, he seems to have used an independent source from the Masoretic tradition, which is now lost. Next slide, please. Dieter Bohler. The resulting Hebrew-Aramaic version of First Esdras was then translated into Greek toward the end of the 2nd century BCE. The other version, Ezra Nehemiah, was probably given its Greek face later in the 1st century CE. Josephus used only First Esdras and the memoirs of Nehemiah, which were still circulating independently, which means, again, Josephus was using two independent sources, two independent books for First Esdras and Nehemiah. So for Josephus, these two were not combined, but were distinct, two distinct books. Next slide.
That's it. That's all of
That's
them.
it. Okay.
Yeah. It ends
So
right there.
what did I want to point out? First, it doesn't match,
Yeah.
the canonical Masoretic text. And second, if Esdras and Nehemiah were truly separated as two independent sources, you have another problem with the 22. You cannot really fit those in. Because if you want the 22 to work, you must combine Ezra and Nehemiah. You don't have other way to reconcile it. And as I said, there's another problem. He used the longer version of Esther, a different chronicles, which included prayer of Manasseh, just problems upon problems upon problems. As you said, Gary, Josephus destroyed the Protestant canon.
Yeah, it does, and also, I mean, the 22 books, again, it's Greek Ezra and the memoirs of Nehemiah, which of course wouldn't be part of the Protestant canon. And remember, Against Appian is a defense of antiquities of the Jews, because the Greeks had called into question whether the Jewish race was really as ancient as he made it out. So he has to defend that period from creation to the advent of the first Greek historians, which is Artaxerxes. Actually, it's a little after the first Greek historians. And so he definitely would consider First Esdras to be rock solid history, along with the memoirs of Nehemiah. So that would be part of the 22 for sure.
Yeah. What's interesting, Protestant would point out that, First Esdras has errors in there. Josephus says, no, that's legit.
Right.
Yeah.
All righty, let's see. Audience, how long you got, Gary? How long you got?
Yeah, I should get going in a couple of minutes. I see Ari has a super chat.
Yeah, Ari sent the super chat over there on the Apocrypha Apocalypse. If the Septuagint version of the Book of Esther adds prayers and speeches and explicit references to God that don't exist in the Hebrew, how is that not adding to Scripture? How do you answer that, Gary? I'm going to get up and get a Diet Coke real fast, and I'll be back in just a second.
Yeah, I think it's really with the nomenclature, right? When you say it adds books, that presumes that Hebrew Esther is the original Esther, and the Greek expanded version has additions to it. So it's kind of, the verbiage there kind of is what do I want to say, presumptuous, right? It assumes the conclusion that this must be additions, when in fact the Septuagint's expanded Esther. That's why I like to use rather than additions, because it basically floated around in two different versions, right? A larger and a smaller, a longer and smaller, just like Jeremiah, right? You have longer and shorter Jeremiah and other books.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, precisely. You're reading my mind, because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have Jeremiah in two actual versions, one short and one longer. And they come from a different period. The shorter is older than the longer, which comes later. So, like, should we say that these expansions of Jeremiah were added, and now we have some added text?
Yeah.
I would agree with you, Gary, that these are rather different recensions. It's like with Esdras and Ezra. Some scholars do really recognize that these are two somehow not necessarily conflicting versions, but some of the Jews prefer these, some of them prefer those, and they did not have one single unified text. That's just how it was. That's what Dead Sea Scrolls attest to. We cannot just close our eyes and think that all the Jews all the time had one single unified text. No, they didn't have. And so, and yeah, the same with Esther, as also Orthodox Philip pointed out, actually the Greek Esther had its own Hebrew Vorlage. I hope I'm pronouncing it precisely in German. So the original Hebrew text, and of course there we have scholars who say these additions to Esther also had a Hebrew origin. So once again, you had competing texts. I'm not sure. You had this longer one, the shorter one, and some of different Jews prefer different texts.
Yeah, and Josephus would love expanded Esther because it really does it contains letters and things like that. So it's very historical in its character.
Early church fathers loved expanded Esther.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And in the Catholic Church, what we really need to believe is what is inspired. And whether it was written by Esther, these additional things, or someone else under inspiration added to them, so what? Even church fathers were like, speculating whether, for example, Hebrews was truly written by Paul, it was written by Clement, or as Jerome says, whatever the case is, it's inspired. Period.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah.
Great point. All right, how about we tackle one final one? It came in earlier from the brother Jimmy. He was asking, and I'll tackle this, and you all can provide whatever you want. Is there a contradiction, he was asking, and it's a claim that the atheist Alex O'Connor made. Is there a contradiction in the Gospels in the appearance to Mary Magdalene in the bodily resurrection, where Alex O'Connor claims that Mary Magdalene says, we don't know where they've taken the Lord. And then in the Gospel of St. John, she says that in the Gospel of St. John. Then in the Gospel of St. Luke, Jesus appears to her. So there's a clear contradiction when those words are uttered, that this shows that there is a massive contradiction. Why do we have this particular contradiction? What is going on there? And I looked at that, and I'm very well aware of it. I've heard this argument brought up. It isn't a good one, but I wanted to get the verses out to go over it. It's not a contradiction at all. So I lined them up just for you, Brother Jimmy. Thank you for your support, brother. God bless you, my friend. We can see in John, the Gospel of St. John, where Mary Magdalene says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We do not know where they have laid him. But that happens before Mary Magdalene is able to understand the bodily resurrection. So she sees the stone that is moved. She says, she assumes the body's been taken. Then she runs to St. Peter and St. John. And when she says, that shows she's not alone. So Mary, it's focusing on Mary there, while the other Gospels mention other women. But notice how in the Gospel of St. John in the Greek, we have the plural. In the Greek, it says, we do not know. It's in the plural. So St. Luke then is not saying Mary understood everything before that moment. Actually, Luke is compressing. He's summarizing and compressing. Because remember how Luke writes his gospel account. He knows that there are already eyewitness accounts before him that have been written. He knows that. He knows accounts that have already been circulating in the region. So he wants to kind of make a to kind of compress it and to summarize it, if you will. So he does do that. But when you look at the order, I'm going to show you the order, and I wrote it down in a very haphazard manner, but I will tell you how it goes. So Mary Magdalene and the women go to the tomb. That is according to the Gospel of St. John, because the text is in the plural there. They then find that tomb empty. Mary Magdalene then says she believes the body was moved or it was stolen. We do not know where they laid him. And then, of course, later on, you continue onward. And then after that, Mary does encounter the risen Jesus. Then the women report the news to the apostles. But the fact that St. John is focusing on Mary Magdalene and her being confused at a point in time, her initial confusion, if you will, while then St. Luke is summarizing this. Again, you would expect this. And Gary, who has written a great book, an incredible book, where he goes into matters like this, and Gary's talked about this many times before. These are not contradictions. Rather, you would expect this from people that are eyewitnesses. And St. John is dealing with Mary's initial confusion, while you've got the kind of summary there in St. Luke, because he's interviewed people, he's writing the style of the historian Thucydides, and he's summarizing the event. So you've got different details that are being highlighted by each gospel author, but you don't have any contradictions at all. Anything to add to that, David or Gary?
Nope.
You fleshed it out very clearly.
There you go. AB, thank you for the super chat on patristic pillars. He says, I have a cousin who is overweight named Esther. We called her expanded Esther. This guy's won the internet for the day, man. Don't let Esther tune into the show. All right, AB?
Yeah.
Do not let expanded Esther tune into the show.
But AB, that means your cousin is complete.
There
That's
you go.
right.
Complete and hold on. Complete and lacking nothing. We
Yeah.
add to that. Complete and lacking nothing. A very clearly superior version to herself when she had not become expanded Esther.
Yeah. And she's not godless, Esther, either.
There you go. She's not godless, man. There you go. There you go. No doubt at all. I gotta say,
Ari, if you want to come on the show, if you want something to clarify.
Yeah.
and Ari said she didn't understand. I was not in the room.
Yeah, look, Ari, I would not understand myself either, so don't worry.
Oh, Ari, if you want to come back here, I don't know. Yeah. Hold on, man. We got this guy here, man. Christopher, are you well, buddy? Are you okay, man? You're right.
I'm very well. You put a
Doing
challenge.
all right,
you want
buddy?
to debate people.
Doing all right,
I'll debate you. I'm doing well. I uploaded that
Doing all
video.
right,
Yes,
man.
I uploaded that
I know,
video.
Of course, you're good. Christopher.
Yeah,
I knew
I made you. I made you look like a complete fool. You know that because you were very rude to me. Rude yesterday.
Christopher, I of course.
Peace be with you guys up above me.
Of
Peace
course
be with you guys.
Of course, you're going to do that, Christopher. You're obsessed with me, Christopher. If you're married,
I've never come to your channel before.
If you're married, you've never come. People
That's
have
false.
people have been sharing all the images of you from the other day. People have been sharing them. Christopher, if you're married, I pity your wife. You think about me more than you think of her. And I'm going to be honest with you, Christopher. I'm going to be very honest with you, brother. I'm a heterosexual male. I'm heterosexual. I don't like men. So, Christopher, with that, peace be with you as well, my friend. You have a great evening. All right, be praying for you, buddy. All righty. All right, there we go. The guy's obsessed. For him to say he has not come to my channel, in our WhatsApp groups, people have been sharing all the images of him. This guy is he's not well. I don't see any other questions coming in. But if somebody sneaks one in, we'll answer it before they go. Or if Ari, I don't know if Ari wants to come up. I've got only 5 minutes, and I got to bounce. I guess maybe we should wrap it up, audience, brothers. Any final thoughts, man? Any final thoughts, guys?
Well, actually, I just want to thank Dr. Triple D for coming on the member stream and also all the people in chat and members for bringing this up. And
Yeah,
I think this is a pretty handy video to go over some of the, Josephus is by no means a slam dunk for Protestants. In fact, I think it's the other way around. I think it's
not at all.
I think it'd be very hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, given those particular passages.
Hey guys, notice what we did. Basically, we were just pointing out the problems in the narrative of the Protestant narrative of the 22 books. We still didn't show you the positive, evidence for the Deuterocanon from Josephus.
We got to do that. We got to do that.
So,
and
by the way, guys,
we'll make a playlist of those two shows. They'll be the definitive on Josephus.
Yeah,
Gotta do that.
And certainly check out Gary's series on Josephus, on the Apocryphal Apocalypse, and his academic paper you will find on academy.edu, where actually argues that Against Apian is not about the canon. That's a wrong theory. So I had this was a blast. I always love these.
It was an incredible audience. It was great. I have got to go. I've got about 4 minutes, and I have to head out. I got to drive somewhere. But it was great being with all of y'all. It was great being with the team again. Man, we got to do it again, guys. We got to do it again, man. We will do it again. Everybody, but Gary, when's the next chill stream?
Next chill stream Wednesday, 3:30 a.m. Eastern time, God willing.
We got to do another stream again soon.
Awesome.
We got to do it. Everybody, God bless you all. Take care, everybody. We'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a great evening, great afternoon, wherever you all are in the world. God bless you all. Y'all take care.